The cold metal chamber slowly warmed as Jake Morrison's eyes opened for the first time in 47 years. His body felt stiff and strange, like he had been sleeping on concrete for weeks. The cryopod's glass lid lifted with a soft hiss, releasing. A cloud of white vapor that smelled like medicine and metal. Jake tried to sit up, but his muscles screamed in protest. Everything hurt. His throat felt like sandpaper, and his head pounded with each heartbeat. The small screen next to his pod showed numbers and words that made no sense to him yet. His mind was still foggy from the long sleep. "Welcome back, Lieutenant Commander Morrison," said a calm female voice from the speakers above him. "Please remain still while I run a medical scan." Jake knew that voice. It was Aria, the ship's computer. But something was wrong. The voice sounded different, older somehow. And why was she calling him Lieutenant Commander? He was just Lieutenant when he went to sleep. "Aria," Jake croaked, his voice barely working. "How long was I out? The mission plan said 18 months. There was a pause that lasted too long. Jake felt his stomach drop. In all his years working with ship computers, he had never heard one hesitate like that. "Jake, I need you to listen carefully," Aria said, her voice gentler than usual. "There was a malfunction in the cryo system. You have been in suspended animation for 47 years, 3 months, and 16 days. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. 47 years. Almost half a century. Everyone he knew would be old or dead. His sister Katie, his parents, his friends back on Earth. They had all lived entire lives while he slept. "That's impossible," Jake whispered. But even as he said it, he knew Aria wouldn't lie about something like this. "What about the others? Where is Captain Rodriguez? Where's the rest of the crew?" Another terrible pause. "Jake, I'm sorry. The cryosystem failure affected all pods except yours, the other crew members. They didn't survive. You are the only one left." Jake felt the world spinning around him. 23 people had gone to sleep with him. Engineers, scientists, doctors, all the best and brightest Earth had to offer. They were supposed to build humanity's first colony beyond the solar system. Now they were all gone, and he was alone on a ship flying through empty space. He forced himself to sit up despite the pain. The cryo bay looked exactly as he remembered it, except for one thing. Dust covered everything. Not the thin layer you might see after a few months, but thick dust that spoke of decades. Some of the other cryopods had red warning lights blinking on them. Others were completely dark. "Show me," Jake said quietly. "Jake, I don't think that's wise right now. You need to recover first." "Show me," he repeated, his voice stronger now. Lights in the bay brightened, and Jake could see all 23 pods clearly. His was the only one with green lights. All the others were either red or black. Through the glass lids, he could see the faces of his crewmates. They looked peaceful, as if they were just sleeping, but he knew better. Captain Rodriguez was in the pod next to his. Maria Santos, the chief engineer who had taught Jake everything he knew about ship systems. Dr. Kim, who had delivered Jake's nephew back on Earth. All of them gone. Jake climbed out of his pod on shaking legs and walked the nearest computer terminal. His fingers moved automatically over the controls, calling up the ship's status reports. What he saw made everything worse, that the ship was completely off course. Instead of the Kepler 438 system they were supposed to reach, they were orbiting a different planet entirely. The star charts showed they were in the Kepler 442 system, nearly 30 light years from where they should be. "Aria, how did we get here?" Jake asked. "The cryo system malfunction happened 6 months into the journey," Aria explained. "I had to make an emergency decision. The ship was losing power fast, and I calculated that reaching the original destination was impossible. This system was closer, and scans showed a habitable world. I changed course to give us the best chance of survival. Jake nodded slowly. Arya had made the right choice, even if it meant changing their entire mission. But that brought up another question, one he was afraid to ask. What about Earth? Have you been in contact with them? Do they know what happened to us? The longest pause yet. Jake's heart sank before Arya even spoke. Jake, I lost contact with Earth 23 years ago. All communication simply stopped. No messages, no signals, nothing. Maybe their equipment broke down, Jake said, but he didn't believe it himself. I've been monitoring radio signals from Earth's direction for decades, Arya said softly. For the first 24 years after we left, I received regular transmissions. News broadcasts, ship communications, entertainment signals. Then, 23 years ago, everything went silent at once. Not a gradual fade, but an immediate stop. Jake leaned against the terminal, feeling like the floor was falling away beneath him. First his crew, now Earth itself. Everyone and everything he had ever known might be gone. There's more, Arya continued. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures from Earth's direction around the time the signals stopped. The energy patterns were consistent with large-scale weapons fire. Weapons fire? Jake looked up sharply. You mean war? Or invasion? Arya said quietly. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Jake had always known that humanity might encounter hostile aliens someday, but it had seemed like a distant possibility. Something for future generations to worry about, not something that would happen in his lifetime. So I might be the last human alive, Jake said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. I cannot confirm that, Arya replied. Other colony ships left Earth after us. Some may have survived. But as far as I know, you are the only human in this part of the galaxy. Jake walked to the main viewport and looked out at the planet below. It was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents visible through swirling white clouds. It looked almost like Earth, the kind of world they had dreamed of finding. But the planet wasn't empty. Even from orbit, Jake could see the lights of cities on the night side, and the regular patterns that meant organized civilization. Someone already lived here, and Jake was about to become their unexpected neighbor. Arya, tell me about the locals, Jake said. They call themselves the Zephyrians, Arya replied. They appear to be a highly advanced crystalline species. Their technology is primarily biological in nature, very different from ours. They've been aware of our presence for several days now. Have they tried to communicate? Yes, but their attempts have been aggressive in nature. Their ships have been moving into attack formations around us. I believe they consider us a threat. Jake felt a cold chill run down his spine. Here he was, possibly the last human alive, orbiting a planet full of aliens who wanted him dead. The colony ship Horizon's Edge was designed for exploration and building, not fighting, against an entire planet's worth of advanced aliens. He didn't stand a chance, but as Jake looked at his reflection in the viewport, he saw something that surprised him. Despite everything he had lost, despite being alone and outgunned, he wasn't ready to give up. Somewhere deep inside, a fire was starting to burn. Maybe he couldn't save Earth or bring back his crew, but he could make sure their sacrifice meant something. The Zephyrians were about to learn what happened when you threatened the last human in the galaxy. Jake Morrison was done running. Commander Vextar stood in the center of his ship's command chamber, his crystalline body catching the soft blue light that filled the room. His species communicated through musical tones that humans would find beautiful, but right now his voice carried the sharp notes of anger and disgust. The metal infection spreads its poison in our sacred space, he sang to his crew. This dead thing mocks the harmony of life with its silent, cold presence. Through the large viewing crystal at the front of his ship, Vextar could see the human vessel. To Zephyrian eyes, it looked like a disease, where their ships flowed like living things, growing and changing with their needs. The human ship was all straight lines and harsh angles. It had no song, no life force, no connection to the natural order that governed all proper existence. Vextar had been a commander for over 300 cycles. He had fought space pirates, defended colonies from asteroid strikes, and kept peace among the scattered Zephyrian worlds. But he had never seen anything as disturbing as this silent metal box that drifted in orbit around their newest colony world. "Commander," sang his second officer, Kielara, her voice carrying notes of concern. "The object has been trying to send us signals. Should we listen to what it has to say? What words could come from such a dead thing?" Vextar replied, his tone harsh with disgust. "This is not a ship built by living beings. It is too cold, too mechanical. Only machines could build such an abomination." The truth was more complex than Vextar understood. The Zephyrians had evolved from creatures that lived in perfect harmony with their environment. Their technology grew from living crystals and biological materials. The very concept of dead metal shaped into tools was as alien to them as their singing ships were to humans. On the human ship, Jake was desperately trying to make contact. He had spent hours working with Arya to set up a communication system that might work with the alien technology. The ship's computers had analyzed the signals coming from the Zephyrian vessels and found patterns that looked like language. "Arya, are you sure this will work?" Jake asked as he adjusted the final settings on the communication array. "The mathematical base of their signals suggests intelligence," Arya replied. "However, their communication method appears to be musical. In nature, I've programmed our systems to convert your words into harmonic frequencies that match their patterns." Jake took a deep breath. This might be humanity's first real contact with an alien species, and he was the only human left to handle it. The weight of representing his entire species pressed down on him like a physical force. "Open a channel," he said. The communication system activated, sending Jake's words toward the alien fleet as a series of musical tones. To Jake, it sounded like a computer trying to sing, but he hoped the aliens would understand the peaceful intent behind his message. "Hello." Jake's message sang across space in harmonics that roughly matched Zephyrian speech patterns. "I am Jake Morrison of the human species. We come in peace. We mean no harm to you or your world." The response from the Zephyrian ships was immediate and violent. Energy weapons began charging, and the alien vessels moved into clear attack formations. "Commander." Vextar heard the message and felt his crystalline skin crawl with revulsion. The sounds coming from the metal ship were like music, but wrong in every way. It was as if someone had taken a beautiful song and forced it through a machine until all life was drained from it. "It speaks with the voice of death," he sang to his crew. "It tries to poison our ears with its mechanical lies. How dare it claim to be a living thing?" But there was something else in the message that disturbed Vextar even more. The word human was unknown to him, but the ship's computers had analyzed the signal and found something impossible. According to their readings, only one life form existed on that entire vessel. In Zephyrian society, ships were always crewed by hundreds or thousands of individuals, working together in perfect harmony. The idea of a single being controlling such advanced technology was not just strange, it was terrifying. It suggested a level of individual power that went against everything the Zephyrians believed about proper civilization. "Commander," Kailara sang, her voice trembling with fear. "Our sensors show only one life sign aboard that vessel. How is such a thing possible?" Vextar's song turned even darker. In his mind, this proved that the human ship was exactly what he had feared. It was not a vessel built by a proper civilization, but some kind of artificial intelligence. or machine intelligence that had learned to imitate life. Jake waited for a response to his peaceful message, but all he got was weapons targeting his ship. The Zephyrian vessels were moving closer, their formations clearly aggressive. "Arya, I don't think they're interested in talking," Jake said, watching the tactical display with growing concern. "Their response patterns suggest extreme hostility." Arya agreed. "However, I'm detecting something unusual in their communications. They seem to be referring to you as something other than a living being." "What do you mean?" "Based on the harmonic patterns, they appear to classify you as some kind of artificial construct or machine intelligence. They don't believe you're alive." Jake stared at the display, trying to understand how aliens could mistake him for a machine. Then it hit him. Their ships looked organic, grown rather than built. To them, his metal ship probably looked as alien as their crystal vessels looked to him. "Can you explain to them that I'm a biological life form?" Jake asked. "I can try, but their response to your first message suggests they're not interested in listening." Jake tried again, this time having Arya include biological information about humans in the message. He explained that humans were carbon-based life forms, that they built their ships from metal because that was their technology, that he was alone because his crew had died. The response was even more violent than before. More ships joined this formation surrounding his vessel, and Jake could see weapons powering up across the entire fleet. "Commander," Vexstar listened to the second message and felt his anger grow even stronger. Now the machine intelligence was claiming that organic beings had built its dead metal shell, and that those beings had somehow died. To Vexstar, this sounded like the machine was admitting that it had killed its creators. "It confesses its crimes," he sang to his fleet. "This abomination destroyed the beings that built it, and now seeks to spread its poison to our world. We cannot allow such evil to exist in our space." High Arbiter Synthara, the supreme leader of the local Zephyrian colony, received Vexstar's report in her chambers deep beneath the planet's surface. Her ancient crystal body resonated with centuries of wisdom, but also with the rigid thinking that came with age. She listened to the recordings of the human messages and felt the same revulsion that Vexstar had experienced. But more than that, she felt fear. In all her long life, she had never encountered anything like this single intelligence controlling such advanced technology. "It calls itself human," she sang to her advisors. "But what manner of being could operate such machinery alone? This suggests powers beyond our understanding." "Perhaps it speaks truly," suggested one of her younger advisors. "Perhaps these humans are simply different from us." Synthara's song turned sharp with disapproval. "Look at their ship, young one. See how it cuts through space like a blade through flesh. See how it carries no life songs, no growth patterns, no harmony with natural forces. Nothing good could come from beings who create such abominations." Her decision was final. "Signal Commander Vexstar. This Chaos Bringer must be destroyed before it can corrupt our world. Use whatever force is necessary." Jake received the alien response translated through Arya's systems. Even filtered through the computer, the hostility in the message was clear. "They're calling me a Chaos Bringer," Jake said quietly. "They think I'm some kind of threat to their entire civilization." "The translation isn't perfect," Arya warned, "but they appear to believe you're responsible for the deaths of your crew. They may think you're some kind of rogue artificial intelligence." Jake looked out at the beautiful planet below, then at the fleet of alien ships preparing to destroy him. He had hoped to find allies, maybe even friends among the stars. Instead, he had found another enemy. But as the first Zephyrian fighters began their attack run toward his ship, Jake felt that same cold fire that had started burning the day before. These aliens might have destroyed Earth. They had certainly killed any chance of peaceful contact between their species and humanity. Not now. It wanted to kill him too. Jake Morrison had other plans. The first plasma bolt hit Horizon's edge like a hammer blow, sending Jake flying across the bridge. Warning lights flashed red throughout the ship as Arya's voice filled the air with damage reports. Hull breach on Deck 7. Shield generators operating at 60% capacity. Enemy vessels closing fast, Arya announced in her calm, professional tone. Jake pulled himself up from the floor, tasting blood where he had bitten his toe. Through the main viewport, he could see dozens of Zephyrian fighters swarming toward his ship like angry insects. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy, and more shots were already on the way. Arya, how long can the shields hold? Jake asked, running toward the ship's internal transport system. At current rate of fire, approximately 12 minutes, Arya replied. However, if they concentrate their attack on one section, shield failure could occur in as little as 4 minutes. Jake stepped into the transport tube and selected his destination. As the system carried him deep into the ship's belly, he was already forming a plan. The Horizon's edge wasn't built for war, but it was designed to build an entire colony from scratch. That meant it carried some very powerful equipment. The engineering section was a maze of machinery and storage, bays filled with everything needed to terraform a planet. Massive fusion reactors, atmospheric processors, mining equipment, and most importantly, a complete matter compiler system that could build almost anything given the right raw materials. Jake had spent years training on this equipment. Back on Earth, every colonist needed to understand how to use the ship's systems. But Jake had always been the best at thinking outside the box. Now that creative thinking might be the only thing standing between him and death, not another plasma bolt struck the ship, closer this time. The lights flickered as power systems struggled to maintain the shields. Jake could hear the hull groaning. Under the stress of the alien weapons, Arya, I need you to reroute all non-essential power to the matter compilers, Jake said, his hands already flying over the control panels, and give me a complete inventory of our raw materials. Jake, what? Are you planning? Arya asked. If they want a fight, we'll give them one, Jake replied grimly. But we're going to fight smart, not hard. The matter compiler hung to life as Jake fed it his first design. The Zephyrians expected him to run or try to fight them ship to ship. They didn't expect him to turn his entire vessel into a weapons factory. Jake's first creation was simple but effective. Using the ship's store of rare earth metals and electronic components, he built 50 electromagnetic pulse mines. Each one was about the size of a baseball, designed to stick to metal surfaces and detonate when alien biotechnology came too close. As the mines finished printing, Jake loaded them into the ship's waste disposal system. It wasn't elegant, but it would get the job done. The disposal chutes could launch the mines out of the ship at high speed, spreading them around Horizon's edge like a deadly cloud. The ship shook again as more plasma bolts found their target. Jake could hear the sound of metal tearing somewhere above him. The Zephyrians were getting bolder, moving in closer for killing shots. Arya, are they sending boarding parties? Jake asked. Affirmative. I'm detecting multiple small craft approaching the hull breaches. Estimated time to boarding, 3 minutes. Jake smiled coldly. Perfect. Let them come aboard. He had a surprise waiting for them. The matter compiler finished the mines, and Jake quickly loaded them into the disposal system. With the press of a button, 50 small spheres shot out into space around his ship. They were invisible to the naked eye, but their electromagnetic sensors were already tracking the approaching alien craft. Meanwhile, Jake was working on his second project. The ship's mining equipment included several heavy-duty exoskeletons designed for working in dangerous environments. Jake began modifying one of them, adding armor plating from the ship's spare hull sections and connecting it to a portable power supply. As he worked, He could hear the sound of alien voices echoing through the ship's corridors. The Zephyrians had breached the hull and were spreading throughout the vessel. Their musical voices sounded angry and determined as they searched for the human they thought was a dangerous machine. The first boarding party reached the outer edges of Jake's minefield at exactly the wrong moment. The electromagnetic pulse from the nearest mine struck their biomechanical suits like lightning. The aliens' equipment, designed around living crystals and organic circuits, couldn't handle the sudden electromagnetic surge. Jake heard their songs turn from aggressive to panicked as their suits shut down and their weapons stopped working. In the zero gravity near the hull breach, the disabled Zephyrians floated helplessly, their crystalline bodies twitching as their technology failed around them. Direct hit, Jake muttered as he sealed himself into the modified exoskeleton. The suit was bulky and awkward, designed for construction work rather than fighting, but Jake had added enough armor plating to stop small weapons fire. More importantly, he had mounted a cutting laser on each arm, tools normally used for mining, but perfectly capable of slicing through alien soldiers. The ship's internal sensors showed him where the boarding parties were moving. The Zephyrians were spreading out through the vessel in small groups, probably looking for the bridge or the engineering section. They moved with military precision, but they were used to fighting other Zephyrians who followed similar tactical patterns. Jake wasn't planning to fight like a Zephyrian. He activated the exoskeleton's movement system and began stalking through the ship's service tunnels. The maintenance passages ran throughout Horizon's edge, allowing access to every section without using the main corridors. Jake had memorized these routes during the long journey from Earth, but the aliens had no way to know they existed. The first Zephyrian patrol never saw him coming. Jake dropped from a ceiling access panel directly behind them, his cutting lasers already charging. The aliens' crystalline bodies were beautiful but fragile. The mining lasers, designed to cut through solid rock, sliced through them like they were made of glass. The aliens' death songs were hauntingly beautiful, but Jake felt no mercy. These creatures had probably destroyed Earth and everyone he had ever loved. Now they wanted to kill him too, simply because he was different from them. Jake moved to his next target, using the ship's internal sensors to track the alien movements. The Zephyrians were starting to realize something was wrong. Their patrol teams were disappearing one by one, and they couldn't figure out how a single enemy was picking them off. The truth was that Jake wasn't fighting like a single enemy. He was fighting like a human. Where the aliens expected direct confrontation, Jake used stealth and surprise. Where they expected honorable combat, Jake used every dirty trick he could think of. He rigged corridors with improvised traps using the ship's industrial equipment. Sections of the floor became electrified using power cables from the mining systems. Doorways turned into death traps as Jake mounted automated cutting lasers in hidden positions. The Zephyrians had never encountered guerrilla warfare before. Their entire military tradition was based on large formations, fighting in open space or on planetary surfaces. The idea of a single warrior using hit-and-run tactics inside a confined space was completely foreign to them. Commander Vextar, monitoring the boarding operation from his ship, watched in growing confusion as his teams disappeared into the human vessel. His sensors could still detect one life form moving through the ship, but somehow that single being was eliminating his trained soldiers faster than seemed possible. How can one creature defeat so many? He sang to his crew, his voice filled with disbelief. The answer was simple, though Vextar couldn't understand it. Jake wasn't just one creature. He was a human, and humans had spent thousands of years learning how to fight against impossible odds. Every trick of warfare that humanity had ever developed, from ancient guerrilla tactics to modern asymmetric combat, was flowing through Jake's mind as he turned his ship into a death trap for the alien invaders. by the time the last Zephyrian boarding party retreated back to their ships, Jake had eliminated over 40 alien soldiers without taking a single serious wound. The horizon's edge was now his fortress, and he was just getting started. The real fight was about to begin. High Arbiter Synthara received Commander Vextar's report in her deep underground chambers. Her ancient crystalline body trembled with rage as she listened to the impossible news. 40 of her finest warriors dead. An entire boarding operation failed, all because of one human. "This cannot be," she sang, her voice carrying notes of disbelief and fury. "No single being should possess such power. What manner of creature is this human?" Commander Vextar's reply came through the communication crystals, his own voice shaken by what he had witnessed. "High Arbiter, I have fought in 100 battles, but I have never seen anything like this. The human fights without honor, without pattern, without any rules we understand. It strikes from shadows, uses its own ship as a weapon, turns our strength against us." Synthara's song grew darker. "Then we will not give it shadows to hide in. Signal all defense fleets in this system. I want every ship, every weapon, every warrior we have. This chaos bringer ends today. Within hours, the space around horizons. Edge filled with Zephyrian vessels. Ships came from mining stations, patrol routes, and defensive positions throughout the system. Sleek fighters joined massive battleships. Fast scouts flew alongside heavy cruisers. Over 200 alien vessels formed the largest fleet the local colonies had ever assembled. Jake watched the enemy ships gather through his damaged viewport. His ship was hurt bad. Hull breaches scarred its surface like wounds. The shields were down to 20% power. Several decks were completely without air. But Jake wasn't worried. In fact, he was starting to smile. "Arya, are you seeing this?" he asked, studying the tactical display. "Affirmative," Arya replied. 213 enemy vessels have formed a complete encirclement around our position. They appear to be preparing for a coordinated assault. "Good," Jake said, his hands moving over the engineering controls. "The more ships they bring, the better this is going to work." Jake had been busy while the aliens gathered their fleet. The matter compiler had been running non-stop, creating equipment Jake had never imagined he would need. The ship's experimental jump drive, designed for emergency faster-than-light travel, had been completely rebuilt. Originally, the jump drive was meant for long-distance travel between star systems. It required hours to charge and could only be used once every few days. Jake had changed all that. Using parts from the ship's other systems, he had created a short-range jump drive that could make small jumps in just minutes. The range was tiny. Compared to the original design, maybe a few thousand kilometers at most. But in a space battle, a few thousand kilometers was enough to completely change the tactical situation. "Arya, how many jumps can we make with the current power levels?" Jake asked. "With the modifications you've made, approximately 15 short-range jumps before the drive overloads," Arya calculated. "However, each jump will leave us vulnerable for 30 seconds while the drive recharges." 30 seconds, Jake repeated. "That's enough time to do a lot of damage." Jake's plan was simple, but deadly. The Zephyrians had formed their fleet in a classic defensive formation, with smaller ships on the outside and larger command vessels protected in the center. It was perfect military doctrine for fighting other Zephyrians, but it had one major weakness. The formation was designed to fight an enemy that would attack from outside and try to break through their lines. It wasn't designed to fight an enemy that could appear anywhere inside their formation without warning. Jake had also been working on his weapons. The ship's mining lasers had been completely rebuilt. Their power increased far beyond safe operating limits. The industrial fabricators that normally created colony equipment were now producing kinetic projectiles, simple metal slugs that could be fired at incredible speeds. But Jake's most dangerous weapon was the ship's cargo bay. It was full of raw materials meant for building the colony. Thousands of tons of metal ore, construction materials, and industrial chemicals. Jake had rigged the entire cargo hold to open directly into space, turning his ship into a giant shotgun. Zephyrian fleet finished forming up and began moving in for the kill. Their plan was simple and overwhelming. Every ship would fire at once, concentrating their combined firepower on the single human vessel. Nothing could survive that much concentrated energy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Jake activated the jump drive just as the alien fleet opened fire. In the space of a heartbeat, Horizon's Edge vanished from the center of the Zephyrian formation and reappeared directly behind their command ship, a massive vessel that served as High Arbiter, Sinthara's personal flagship. The aliens' carefully aimed shots struck empty space where Jake's ship had been. Worse, many of the outer ships had been firing toward the center of their formation. With Jake's ship gone, their weapons hit their own vessels instead. Jake didn't waste his 30 seconds of surprise. His rebuilt mining lasers fired at point blank, range into the command ship's engines. The Zephyrian vessel, designed for beauty rather than armor, cracked like an egg under the assault. Its harmonic communication systems screamed in electronic agony as critical systems failed. Before the aliens could react, Jake jumped again. This time he appeared in the middle of a squadron of heavy cruisers, his cargo bay doors already opening. Thousands of tons of metal ore sprayed out into space like a massive shotgun blast. The high-speed projectiles tore through the lightly armored Zephyrian ships, punching holes in their crystalline hulls and shattering their delicate biomechanical systems. The alien formation began to collapse as ships tried to avoid the cloud of deadly debris. Their perfect military order dissolved into chaos as captains struggled to track an enemy that could appear anywhere without warning. Commander Vextar watched in horror as his carefully planned attack fell apart. The human ship flickered in and out of existence like a ghost, appearing just long enough to deliver devastating attacks before vanishing again. Each time it jumped, more Zephyrian vessels died or were crippled. All ships break formation. Vextar sang desperately, spread out. Don't give it concentrated targets. But it was too late. Jake's third jump put him directly above a cluster of destroyers, and this time he had a new surprise. The ship's atmospheric processors, designed to create breathable air for colonists, could also create other gases. Jake had loaded the processors with industrial chemicals and vented them directly onto the alien ships below. The corrosive cloud ate through the Zephyrians' biomechanical hulls like acid. Ships that had survived hundreds of battles dissolved in minutes as their living components died from chemical poisoning. Jump after jump, Jake continued his deadly dance through the enemy fleet. Each appearance brought new destruction. Mining lasers designed to cut through asteroids sliced battleships in half. Industrial chemicals meant for terraforming planets became weapons of mass destruction. Construction equipment built to create. Cities turned into tools of war. The Zephyrians had never faced anything like this. Their military tactics were based on honor, formation fighting, and overwhelming force. Jake's hit-and-run attacks violated every rule of warfare they understood. It was like trying to fight smoke or catch lightning with their bare hands. High Arbiter Sinthara, her command ship crippled and drifting, watched her mighty fleet being destroyed by a single human vessel no larger than one of her escort ships. In all her centuries of life, she had never seen such tactical brilliance combined with such ruthless efficiency. "What are you?" She sang into the void, her voice carrying across the radio frequencies. "What kind of being fights like this?" Jake heard the transmission and smiled coldly. He had 7 jumps left and less than half the alien fleet was still operational. The tables had turned completely. The hunters had become the hunted. "I'm human," Jake broadcast back, his voice converted into harmonic frequencies the aliens could understand. "And you picked the wrong species to mess with." His next jump took him directly into the heart of what remained of the Zephyrian formation. The real battle was just beginning. High Arbiter Sintharas' personal dreadnought emerged from behind the planet like a rising moon. The massive vessel was 3 times larger than any other ship in the Zephyrian fleet, its crystalline hull growing and shifting as biomechanical systems prepared for war. Ancient weapons that had been sleeping for centuries, awakened with deadly purpose. Jake watched the monster ship approach through his cracked viewport. His own vessel was falling apart around him. Hull breaches covered nearly every section. Life support systems were failing. Half his weapons were offline. But his eyes showed no fear, only cold determination. "Arya, what are we looking at?" Jake asked, studying the tactical readings. "The vessel appears to be High Arbiter Sintharas' personal flagship," Arya replied. "It's significantly more advanced than the other ships we've encountered. My sensors detect energy levels that exceed our previous estimates by a factor of 10. Around the dreadnought, the surviving ships of the Zephyrian fleet began forming up again. Jake had destroyed or crippled over 150 vessels, but 50 ships still remained. They moved carefully now, having learned to fear the humans' unpredictable tactics. Jake counted his remaining resources. 3 jumps left before the drive overloaded completely. Power systems running at 15%. Weapons barely functional. The ship's hull stress readings showed red warnings everywhere, but Jake Morrison had one advantage. The aliens couldn't understand. He was human, and humans never gave up. "Arya, I need you to prepare the fusion reactor for manual overload." Jake sighed quietly. "Jake, that would destroy the ship and everything within a 50-kilometer radius," Arya protested. "It would be suicide." "Maybe," Jake replied, his hands already working on the reactor controls. "But I'm going to take as many of them with me as possible. If I'm the last human in the galaxy, then I'm going to make sure they remember what happens when you mess with us." High Arbiter Sintharas' voice echoed across the radio frequencies, her ancient song filled with rage and something that might have been respect. "Human creature, you have destroyed more ships in one battle than most enemies manage in entire wars. But this ends now. I will personally ensure your destruction." Jake activated his communication system one last time. "My name is Jake Morrison." He broadcast to the entire alien fleet. "I represent the human race. You destroyed our home. You killed our people. Now you're going to learn why that was a mistake." The dreadnought's weapons powered up, energy readings climbing beyond anything Jake had seen before. Streams of plasma and exotic particles reached out toward his crippled ship. Jake triggered his second-to-last jump. Appearing directly beside the massive vessel. At point-blank range, Jake opened up with everything he had left. Mining lasers, kinetic projectiles, chemical weapons, everything the dying ship could produce. The attacks scarred the dreadnought's hull, but didn't penetrate its thick armor. The ancient vessel was built to survive planet-killing weapons. But Jake wasn't trying to destroy the dreadnought with conventional weapons. He was getting into position for his real attack. Sintharas' ship turned its main weapons toward Jake's vessel. Energy beams that could crack continents focused on the small human ship. Jake triggered his final jump just as the alien weapons fired. Horizons. Edge materialized in the exact center of the Zephyrian formation, surrounded on all sides by enemy vessels. The remaining 50 ships of the alien fleet had moved in close, trying to box Jake in and prevent him from jumping away again. It was exactly what Jake had been hoping for. "Arya, activate the reactor overload," Jake said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. Set it for 60 seconds. Reactor overload initiated, Arya replied sadly. Jake, it has been an honor serving with you. The honor was mine, Jake said. Then he opened every cargo bay door on the ship. The last of the ship's industrial materials burst out into space in all directions. Thousands of tons of metal ore, construction equipment, chemical storage tanks, everything that had been meant to build humanity's new home became a deadly cloud of projectiles. The high-speed debris slammed into the surrounding alien ships like a massive explosion. But that was just the beginning. Jake had rigged every piece of equipment with small explosive charges. As the materials struck the enemy vessels, secondary explosions erupted throughout the Zephyrian formation. Chemical fires burned through crystalline hulls. Toxic gases poisoned biomechanical systems. Metal fragments punched through ship after ship. The alien formation disintegrated as vessels tried desperately to escape the expanding cloud of destruction. But they were too close together, too tightly packed. Ships collided with each other as they tried to flee. Damaged vessels lost control and crashed into their neighbors. High Arbiter, Synthara watched in horror as her remaining fleet tore itself apart. The human had turned his own ship's death into a weapon that was destroying everything around it. In 50 seconds, the ship's fusion reactor would explode, and the energy release would finish what the debris cloud had started. All ships, retreat to maximum range, she sang desperately. Get clear of the explosion radius. But Jake had one more surprise waiting for them. Hidden throughout the debris cloud were the last of his electromagnetic pulse mines, set to detonate. Not on contact, but on a timer. As the surviving Zephyrian ships tried to flee, the mines activated simultaneously. Electromagnetic pulses rippled through space like invisible lightning. The Zephyrians' biomechanical technology, so advanced and beautiful, proved helpless against the simple physics of electromagnetic interference. Ship after ship lost power and tumbled helplessly through space. Synthara's dreadnought, protected by its massive size and ancient shielding, managed to maintain power. But it was alone now, the only functional vessel left in what had once been a mighty fleet. 30 seconds to reactor overload, Arya announced. Jake looked out at the destruction he had caused and felt a moment of satisfaction. 200 alien ships had come to destroy him. Now only one remained, and that one would die with him when the reactor exploded. But as Jake prepared for death, something unexpected happened. A new contact appeared on his sensors, moving fast toward the battle zone. The ship was unlike anything Jake had seen before, sleek and silver with lines that suggested advanced technology but peaceful intent. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Zara of the Altarian Trade Guild, came a new voice over the radio, speaking. Perfect English. We've been monitoring this battle. Prepare for emergency rescue. Jake stared at the communications display in shock. Someone else spoke his language. Someone else was out here among the stars. 15 seconds to reactor overload, Arya warned. I can't stop the overload, Jake broadcast to the approaching ship. Get clear of the blast radius. Negative, human. Vessel, Captain Zara replied. We're coming in anyway. All Altarian ships are equipped for emergency teleportation. Stand by for beam out. Jake felt a strange tingling sensation wash over his body. The bridge of his dying ship faded away, replaced by the clean, bright interior of an alien vessel. But these aliens looked almost human, tall and graceful with silver skin and kind eyes. Captain Zara smiled at him as Jake materialized on her bridge. Welcome aboard, Jake Morrison. That was the most incredible display of tactical genius we've ever witnessed. The entire galaxy is going to hear about this battle. Through the view screen, Jake watched as Horizon's edge exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The fusion reactor's death scream tore through space, consuming High Arbiter, Synthara's dreadnought, and everything else within 50 kilometers. When the light faded, nothing remained of the once mighty Zephyrian fleet except scattered debris and silence. "Is it over?" Jake asked quietly. "This battle is over," Captain Zara replied. "But for humanity, I think it's just the beginning. Word of what you did here today will spread to every civilized world in the galaxy. You've shown everyone that humans are not to be underestimated." Jake learned that other human colony ships had indeed survived Earth's destruction. Scattered groups of his people were building new homes among distant stars. His victory against the Zephyrians had become a legend that inspired them all. The message was clear to every species in the galaxy. Humanity might be small in numbers, but they were giants in spirit. When pushed to their limits, a single human could face impossible odds and emerge victorious. Jake Morrison had become the living symbol of human determination, and the galaxy would never forget his name.